Larry Pesce is a recognized cybersecurity researcher, SANS instructor, and vice president of services at Finite State, with deep expertise in IoT, embedded systems, wireless security, and penetration testing. His recent research and talks have focused on the growing risk inside connected devices, software supply chains, and how AI is changing the way vulnerabilities are discovered and exploited. Today, Larry joins us to discuss securing the connected supply chain, IoT risk, AI, and the future of cyber resilience. Thank you for joining the APT and Cybersecurity LinkedIn Live event. Hello, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us. Restream did an update, and I sat there and spent the last hour hoping this would work and modifying the screens. And I was like, oh my gosh, is this video going to work, this intro? And it did. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. We actually have a new special co-host with myself, Lee Archinall. Lee, thank you so much for joining us and help us here while Alex is out.
Pleasure to be here.
And then Larry Pesce is our incredible guest. Larry, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, no problem. And Aaron, yeah, I definitely know those feels. One of the things that didn't come in the little intro there is that my good buddy Paul Asadorian and I have been doing Paul's Security Weekly, formerly with a different name that we don't mention. We've been doing that for almost 21 years for a weekly security podcast. So
wow.
we are very familiar with when something changes.
Okay. So,
yeah. So I think the first 10 years that we did the podcast, we actually had to set up the equipment every week.
Oh, wow.
In either a new location. So we were having... Yeah, every week was a constant. Where is that ground loop hum coming from?
Oh, yeah.
So we're very familiar with when something changes and that something's different. So I feel your pain.
So today we have a really cool topic, right? So we're going to be talking about securing the connected supply chain, IoT risk, AI, and the future of cyber. So Larry, I always try to start off, if you could give me just a little bit of background on kind of who you are, and kind of where you're working at right now. That'd be fantastic.
Yep. So yeah, I'll make the background a little short. I spent a lot of time doing networking in a couple of different organizations, higher ed, healthcare, you name it, which led me into a sort of an enterprise security career. Where I was responsible for doing policies, disaster recovery, pen testing, advisory work into that healthcare organization for all of their security stuff. The long and short of it, I was the only one that had a clue when they got hacked and helped them do some incident response.
Yeah.
And a couple of weeks later, it was, we should probably really take this seriously. Fingers pointing at Larry, you're it. You did get to now carry this ball. I spent over a decade doing that, and really started to get a passion for these connected devices that were coming into our homes. Paul and I wrote a book about hacking the Linksys WRT54G.
Yes.
And that was really the pivot point for where these connected devices were so much fun for me. So we've been doing that really, close to 20 years.
Wow.
Into the connected devices, which turned into wireless and turned into some SANS classes. But where I am right now, I lead the team over at Finite State. Role is changing a little bit as we grow as a company, but the current focus with my team is to do the penetration testing. We're doing some automated testing using things like AI, specifically on connected devices. And we work with the manufacturers all the way down to even folks that are doing the implementation. And we really got our start as a company doing supply chain stuff. So
Yes.
we're just sort of adding on to the supply chain portion, that you need to know what's inside your devices, and then we're going to take what's inside your devices and try to go exploit it and really go to that nth degree.
And we'll definitely kind of cover a lot of that stuff, kind of go over it, and definitely in our segments. So we always break our event kind of into segments, right? And then our first segment, what we're going to do is talk about the connected device has become the attack surface, right? And I'm going to give a little spiel here on the news, right? And I might be pronouncing some of this stuff wrong, so I'm sorry. So it says the Azura, a Mirai class IoT botnet, was behind a 15.72 terabyte per second DDoS attack that was mitigated by Microsoft. More recently, researchers reported that it had been recruited hundreds of thousands of compromised IoT and Android-based devices. So my question is, what's driving this scale? Is it simply more vulnerable devices, or is there more something deeper going wrong in how these products are built and maintained?
I think the answer is yes. So, I think we're finding more more devices out there with more vulnerabilities, and it does arguably stem from the way some of the development is done. But let me sort of break um, a lot of those down a little bit here. Um, we are definitely seeing more connected devices out there. We are definitely seeing those devices taking more and more scrutiny. And then this definitely comes into more and more scrutiny over longer periods of time. When we saw about some of the stuff with like Salt, Black, Typhoon, and I can never keep the names straight because they all have Typhoon in them, and they all did little bits of different things.
Yeah,
But there was definitely a segment of those that were tied to a bunch of exploits that were for connected devices that could be used to either compromise upstream as a pivot point or to start doing some of the DDoS stuff that you saw with the Mirai.
yeah,
But these were devices that were, and I'm going to use the term legacy devices, they'd been end of lifed by the manufacturer, but they are perfectly suitable for use. I mean, I have a bunch of these devices still in use in my home network and in the library for hacking and so forth. They're still suitable. People use them day in and day out, but they're no longer supported by the manufacturer. They're not getting security updates. And when you consider the supply chain, they're full of software that now is not getting updates, that new vulnerabilities are being found in day to day.
the quickest one I see is, the attackers don't always seem to care about the data on the camera or the router.
Right.
Organizations, what is the kind of the reason for that? The attacking, if they don't care about the data of the router, what is the reason for that?
Yeah, and I think we're actually seeing a little bit of pivot in that change, especially when we consider the router with the data that does flow through it. Um, for the most part, the adversaries have been using that as a pivot point into an internal network to compromise other hosts to get data from in maybe some more high value type of targets. Um, Also, as another opportunity to have a footprint in another location. If you think
Yeah,
about, nation state actors, like you start delivering your attacks from said nation state where you're tied to, it's a pretty easy way to point fingers at who's doing it. But when you're launching those attacks from all over the planet, whether that be denial of service or otherwise, it makes it a lot more difficult to sort of tie that down to any one specific nation state.
yeah,
Some other things, and part of the reason why we're starting to see the pivot, I was, and this is going to sound weird, I was super excited to see when I considered the wireless class that I teach for SANS, some things that we have been teaching the students that are possibilities for hacks against wireless networks that nation state actually started to use. And specifically, they were starting to compromise a connected device with the captive portal for wireless networks, compromising the portal, and it was very much a wide net for folks that might be using hotel Wi-Fi networks. And
yeah,
it wasn't so much about having the portal; it was because now they could control the access and they could control the data, so that they were starting to be concerned about the data that was traversing, being able to capture usernames, passwords, multi-factor authentication against a whole bunch of Microsoft accounts.
are they just acting as a man in the middle on the
Yeah,
Wi-Fi?
yeah, exactly. They were compromising that one gateway and becoming machine in the middle on the network to capture all that data for
Got it.
a bunch of hotels. Yeah, some of those had some VIPs in them. Some of them they didn't care what they were getting, but
Wow.
it was more credentials and more things to add to their inventory.
So, Larry, for a CISO with thousands of connected devices, how do you figure out which ones represent the greatest risk then?
That is a really great question. Um, Even back to that, I think one of the things that we've been talking about on Security Weekly, which is crazy, that I think we really need to start going back to basics.
Yeah.
And I think the basic part there is inventory. You got to figure out what's on your network first, so that you need to know what you need to be concerned about, right?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it's still shocking about how many organizations have no idea what's on their network, and they have no idea what they need to be concerned about and what's getting compromised and don't.
Got to
So
ask the
yeah,
SOC at that point, right?
yeah, exactly. Ask the SOC, because they can tell you everything that's talking out on the internet, and even that new stuff that shows up that was compromised that you didn't know about, and a whole bunch of shadow IT stuff too. So yeah, exactly.
Larry, kind of what type of connected devices do you think companies still overlook the most at this time?
Oh, that is a what do they overlook? I think some of the things that the enterprise folks are really missing. Uh, you're probably taking a broad scope on what connected devices look like. I'm gonna start pushing into maybe even to the mobile phone market, because those are a whole bunch of connected devices, maybe a little bit not traditionally considered IoT, but we are definitely seeing more type of attacks towards that stuff. But if we consider the more connected devices, there's stuff on every enterprise network that folks are dealing with. A lot of that ends up being HVAC, more what we refer to as ICS or SCADA type of environments.
Oh, yeah.
We're seeing in the news with all sorts of connected water plants and so forth. These are all stuff that's going to be in a, a good sized enterprise network, whether that be your burglar alarm, your inexpensive Wise cameras for small to medium business, and the larger installations for those as well, because maybe they're not patched
Yeah.
and addressed as nearly as often as they should be.
Lee, let's move on a little bit to our second segment where we talk about can you trust a device before you turn it on? And I'm going to let Lee kind of take this over a little bit and ask the questions and have fun with this one.
Yeah, so Bad Box 2.0 involved millions of Android-based devices, with some carrying malware before they even reach the customer. We've also seen malware distributed through trusted update mechanisms and automotive head units. So I guess the real question here is, what happens when a device itself can't automatically be trusted?
That is a huge problem. Some of the research that Paul and I did a little bit, and some of the stuff that I even just talked about at DEF CON, like, yeah, there are so many times when these devices cannot be trusted. The talk that they gave at DEF CON, illustrated a device that had a 20-year-old vulnerability, a 20-year-old CVE present for something that I had bought off of Amazon a couple of
Yeah,
weeks prior.
I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So can you trust that device? No,
Yeah.
no. And you even talk about some of the pre-owned stuff. Some of the work that I helped Paul with was Android TV boxes. Like, you buy a cheap Android TV box off of Amazon, and some of those are already coming backdoored with C2 on them right from the manufacturer. And yeah, you
Why
can't.
is that all nation state then? Obviously.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say it's likely nation state supported. They're definitely being manufactured in countries where that support. I
Okay.
cannot tie that to any specific nation state and can't prove it, so I want to be careful what I'm saying there.
Of
But
course. Of course.
it seems very likely. Very
Okay.
likely. Hey, we'll help subsidize your business if you put this thing on, and we'll help. Yeah, we'll help your business if you can get us some backdoors in some places. So
Let me ask you a theoretical question then, because
absolutely.
Working with customers, I've learned a lot about with risk, but when it comes to like products like this, if you could like sit down and think about like how many companies actually vet these vendors or put these products through a security vendor I don't know, risk assessment or whatever the case may be. What I mean, is it possible that they could? I mean, because if you think about IoT devices, there's tons of them out there. A lot of them aren't like again, we're not thinking about. We don't take them probably as seriously as putting a new firewall in or whatever the case may be. But if they would add that to their plans and to the governance and regulation and stuff, would that just absolutely create a whirlpool or just like a time sink that no one could really even do that? Or is it plausible that they can invest and vet these vendors in a timely manner to still reach the goals of the business?
Yeah, so this is sort of a multifaceted sort of answer and a little bit on the longer side. Traditionally, we have seen that enterprises, customers that are looking to put some of the stuff on their network, they don't do the really in-depth vetting of these products that they're putting on, largely because it's an expensive proposition. Like, why should Larry have to hire a pen tester at $40,000-$60,000 to test this IoT ecosystem that I'm putting into my environment of, say, a bunch of connected cameras, when the manufacturer should have already made sure that we were secure? Like, why? As an enterprise, as Larry is the enterprise, it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to spend a lot of money to go pen test this stuff when the manufacturer should provide a recent pen test report for the stuff and illustrate how they have continued to maintain security for that. So we hadn't seen a lot of that. Depending on the size of the organizations, they are having teams look at this stuff, but it really comes back to the manufacturer or the reseller to do some of that. And quite honestly, this is where I think something like the EU Cyber Resiliency Act is an amazing benefit for the consumer. Because if you are taking a device and you're selling it into the European market, regardless of whether or not your device is in the US market or in APAC, if your device is being sold in the EU, you need to do a whole bunch of things, including having the ability for folks to report vulnerabilities to you. You have to respond to them with a timeline, like 24, 72 hours, and even 14 days after fixes are available. You have to have vulnerability management plans. You have to be able to deploy patches. You have to be able to communicate with your customers to say there are problems. And there are timelines and there are fines associated with not doing this. So to me, this is really going to start building trust into these products. Back to the previous sort of little section there.
But
This
this is
start
for
building trust.
this is
into these
for
products.
EU only though. This is for you talking about the EU
This is,
Act.
yeah,
Yeah.
This is EU only. But in converse, I talk to my students about wireless stuff and like, hey, if you're in the EU and you buy a device and it has this FCC ID on it, go look that up at the United States Federal Communications website. You can get data on this device.
Yeah.
Same sort of thing. If you're buying a device here in the US and it's a router model XYZ, go look at the European counterpart of this, and it's very likely going to have the same sort of issues and the same sort of commitment to security. Because if you write a set of firmware, so many of them, the firmware is largely the same globally, and in many cases, the same hardware globally. So lots of advantages to this program in the EU, and I think it would be a really a smart thing for us to do in the US to do similar types of things to at least ride on coattails, and improve some of our programs like Cyber Trustmark to be very similar.
NIST has their AI stuff too, doesn't it? That matches.
Yes.
Or no? Yeah.
Very similar. Very similar. I haven't dug into a lot of the regulations on the AI portion,
Yeah.
but more on the connected device side.
Okay. And I guess I'm going to throw a two-parted question at you then. So
Okay.
because we kind of addressed like the governance regulation part of it, but say you are an organization and you get a product that you really can't fully trust, right? From the get-go. How do you secure it? And if you are putting safeguards around it, like cordoning off or quarantining it, just so that it can only communicate over certain ports, limiting all that. Can you do that? Will it work? And is it worth doing that instead of vetting the product even more? Or which route would be like, I guess, the ideal, or which one's easiest for enterprises? So again, two
Yeah,
parts.
yeah. The ideal is to do both. Yeah, to vet it and quarantine it. Yeah, that's kind of back to basics thing. Like we talked for years about you should be doing segmentation on your networks, maybe even starting into what we were referring to as micro segmentation. And yeah, these are probably still things that we should be considering. And there are still so many organizations out there that are still having to get better at this type of stuff. Yeah, if you've got these connected devices, they should be maybe even on their own segment with their own ecosystem. It's going to take some work to make it work. But you know what? It's probably stuff that we should have been doing a long time ago, and now is a great time for you to get caught up with some of that technical debt that that maybe has been hanging around. It's still not going to be cheap, but what are the alternatives? You trust the
Yeah.
device as it comes in, and or you don't spend a lot of time vetting. Heck, even if you do spend some time vetting, spend some time vetting. Maybe it is not the depth of one of those $120,000 pen tests on the IoT ecosystem, but you should at least start doing at least some of it and have some of those folks either in house or on a contract basis.
Yeah, throw it in like a controlled environment, like a lab, watch what happens for a
Yep.
week, 2 weeks, then see, if it passes the feels good test, then,
Yep.
again, still micro segment if you
Yep.
can. But yeah, all right.
Yeah,
Um,
and while you're doing that and while you're doing that quote feel good test in that lab environment, you're learning about what it needs to communicate so that you can start building that segmentation when you actually move it into production. So you know what it needs, and that you can even find out when something unusual happens and whether it actually breaks the system, or if it's other indicators that something else has gone wrong.
I feel like that would be like a great first step instead of pulling in the pen testers to actually like attack them and like tear it apart. Because if you can tell like right off the bat that, hey, why is it communicating over this port? That's weird. Why is it trying to? Then I
Hmm.
think that, yeah, okay. Hey, thanks for that
Yeah.
insight. So we're going to continue down this road, but like, so we get a product, right? You bought it from a certain vendor, but inside it's multi vendors, right? So you got a single piece or device made, kind of Frankenstein together from multiple vendors. Who do you contact? Who's the person that is, who really can you point to and say, what's going on? Why is it doing this? And, or report or help or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Yeah, and that starts to get really tricky. And this was one of the ones that we were experienced firsthand. And it's always been that, oh yeah, this is the thing you got to do, and this is the problems. But I think really, if you're starting to see this stuff, your first contact is the vendor that put their name on the device. And if you're seeing weird stuff, they should be the go-to for everyone else. Um, and this was exactly one of the things that we had when we did the research behind what became the DEF CON presentation that I did this past year. We bought an inexpensive device, and it was completely off a lark. It was for a little, a little hacking challenge for our company kickoff for a group of folks. And we bought the device. We found some vulnerabilities in it, and turned out the name on the box was not the one we really needed to talk to because it had been white labeled. There was another manufacturer upstream that sold their devices to like 5 or 6 different companies, and as a white label, and we just happened to buy one of the white labels. So they ended up sort of, after doing some more research on our end, we contacted them and said, hey, are these the people that are doing the white label upstream? Now, they probably should have helped us with that because they knew where they were getting it, and say, hey, you reported a vulnerability in our product. Well, it's really coming from this layer above. And that's the commercial side. The non-commercial side is, if you think about how many of these devices are in our networks, and that we're purchasing IoT, SCADA, you name it, how much of that has open source component to it? And that's another huge problem. Like, yeah, yeah, I'm using SSH of such and such a version in my product, and now there's vulnerabilities released in that particular version of SSH. Well, I found this problem with vendor A's product. I reported to vendor A when it's really a problem with OpenSSH. Yeah. So it's multifold.
Especially with the problem comes whenever that version was meant to be vulnerable or
Yeah, yeah, where somebody takes control or starts supporting a project, an open source project, and then now has control of it and can insert their own code. Yeah, we've seen that a bunch of times recently. So yeah, and
it's
now
not
it's
a feature
intentionally
though, it's a
vulnerable.
bug. Or no, sorry, it's not a bug, it's a
Oh,
feature.
that's a feature, right? Right, a feature. Right.
All right, when you talked about the camera, was that was that a security camera that you guys did when you analyzed?
I mean, security is a stretch of the imagination, right? So it's a home security camera. It's literally sitting
Yeah.
right here next to me. Yep. Yeah, inexpensive home security camera. You manage it with an app, and we took it apart and added serial connectivity to it for the challenge, and yeah, it was cheap. But security, yeah, yep,
But was that the one that was basically, it was a vulnerability disclosed back in 2002?
yes,
Wow. And
yep,
that
yeah,
honestly, that was a good leeway, because I was going to ask, go into talk about the vulnerability nobody knew they had. And actually, that's a great kind of segue into it, because my question is, how does a vulnerability from 2002 end up inside a product sold in 2026?
yeah, yeah. And I don't know if I can answer that question, but I think I can. I have an idea as to sort of where that process broke down. This is I envision that the folks that were building the firmware for that device at the manufacturer, they need, in this particular case, a web server. They needed a web server that was very minimal,
Yeah.
that was in C, that they could compile and could just serve a couple pages, and they didn't need a whole lot of features with all sorts of extensions and authentication and you name it. And they found this really lightweight web server. And well, turns out this web server was written in 1999 as a C programming project for someone taking, I think it was their master's degree at the time,
Hmm.
and was admittedly hot garbage. But the gentleman that wrote it's like, yeah, I know it's hot garbage,
But
and
it
that was
works.
kind of the point. But it works, and
It
that was
works.
like that's exactly what the
Yeah.
problem is.
If you've ever
It
worked for a
works.
software developer, if it works, it works.
Yeah, it
just don't
works.
touch it.
Yeah, just don't
Yeah,
touch it. Yeah. And
and
the guy who
you know
wrote it, don't ever fire him, please.
Yeah. And I can very much envision that, like, hey, we need a super lightweight web server. So they go to Google and search for super lightweight web server. And this is one that shows up, and it's a couple hundred lines of code, and it does exactly what we need it to do. Ship it.
Yeah.
And like, not even worrying about, doing the research, whether it's got vulnerabilities in it, because well, it's only like a couple hundred lines of code. There could be no vulnerabilities in this thing. Well, yeah, sure enough, in the early 2000s, someone found that it had directory traversal, and with no authentication, and all you need to do is be able to hit the web server port, and now you have access to the full file system. And that was what we had found, and we were like, oh my god, we got directory traversal in this new thing, and like, no, turns out it was software that was written like 20 something years ago, and has never really been updated. But there was fixes for that, and they picked the old version. So how does something like that end up there? Well, maybe those are some decisions made on the developer, but how does it end up in a product nowadays? Like, to me, that really speaks to that organization's development practices
Oh, yeah.
and how they're dealing with their software supply chain.
Yes.
Like, I'd venture to guess that they did not have a software bill of materials for their firmware for that device, whether that be their first party, the stuff that they wrote, or the third party code that they brought in, like this web server. And I can guarantee they didn't enrich that SBOM either. So taking all of the pearls for the identified pieces of software and comparing those to known CVEs, because that would have been a huge red flag for someone looking at an enriched SBOM for something like that.
I was going to ask, so are companies actually using SBOMs to manage risk, or are too many still treating them as a compliance exercise?
Yeah, I think there are many organizations that are still treating them as a compliance exercise,
Yeah.
and they should be. They should be using them. That was some talked about at RSA a couple of years back about for evil. And yeah, we should be asking manufacturers for SBOMs, even if they're not enriching them, if they're not enriching them as an attacker. But it wasn't so much as that, like, I was asking, our adversaries to go get SBOMs and enrich them and then attack the devices. No, use that as an internal audit mechanism for your software development lifecycle. Yeah, at phases of the build, drop an SBOM, enrich it, and provide that back to your developers of say, hey, look, you use these software packages and these have got critical 9.9 CVEs in it. Maybe we shouldn't be using this version of the software when there are updated versions available. Sure, I understand it might be a little bit of work, but like that's a no-brainer for a little bit of work out there to do that enrichment. To start helping secure that supply chain. Like that seems like a no-brainer to me.
And honestly, as a customer, I think if I would see something like that, constant improvement, constant enrichment, constant update, I mean, that alone just starts building trust right away.
Of course.
Versus, hey, nothing, we don't have track of anything, but you should buy our product.
Yeah.
You want to make them feel safe.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that was really where the initial forays into cyber trust mark here in the US was really intending to go. And you bring about that trust, that whole trust mark. And the vision that I saw for cyber trust mark before it got shut down a little bit and is now being reinvigorated was that if you go into your big box electronics retailer, it's going to have a QR code on the front of it that you can scan that was going to bring you to a website that had a security rating for that device as you were standing there in the store. So it's supposed to go to a website. You're supposed to have an overall security rating of like a 6.2. It's a medium security. And you look at the next one on the next shelf for this router or camera, and it was a 9.9. And that was supposed to be semi-real-time data because they were going to need to produce a software bill of materials, and they were going to need to enrich that, and they were going to need to enrich that continuously for the lifetime of the product. So as folks are finding new vulnerabilities and they're getting reported, your security rating could drop depending on what was actually shipped in your product.
Wow.
And whether you're doing updates and you can document those updates into the latest version of firmware. Like that's a great vision for something like Cyber Trust Mark.
Yeah.
You know who I feel would benefit from that the most? The family IT guy.
Yes.
Hey, should I buy this? Scan the code. What's the score?
Yep. No. Yeah, what's the score? Yeah, no or yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Talk about saving him a freaking massive headache.
Right?
Yeah, and if you really think about where we went with something like Salt Typhoon, like similar types of things, if some of those devices were participating in the Cyber Trust Mark program, these end-of-life devices, like you go see there was a rating on these in the 1.0 for these end-of-life devices that are going to get compromised, and now not only compromise your network but potentially be used to attack others too. Like, yeah, absolutely. Now, granted, we would have had to do that 10 years ago, but think 10 years later from now when we can still potentially do that.
Just imagine. I used to work in the OT space where you would go into these plants and they would be using old Allen Bradley PLCs that can't be updated for 20 years. They can't be touched. Yep. Because they're running something critical within the plant, never patched anything. And you quickly realize, everyone wants to patch fast, has to do it. And the instances within the OT, they're like, man, don't touch and keep your internet away from me.
Yes.
Basically, don't put any lines near me. I don't want a historian in here. So I'm sorry, I'm kind of trailing off. But I think next segment you're going to definitely like, because I think you've been talking about this more recently, is AI changing both sides of the fight. And I'm going to hand it over to Lee to kind of ask the questions here.
So AI is adding another layer to the supply chain problems. Attackers aren't only looking for vulnerable endpoints anymore. They're increasingly targeting trusted software packages, development pipelines, identities, tools, and you name it. At the same time, you've been experimenting with AI from an offensive side. And at DEF CON, you discussed an AI-driven penetration testing agent that discovered an IoT vulnerability in hours. What happened when you gave an AI agent access to real-time penetration tools? I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I've
Yeah.
been meddling with them too, for research purposes. I've gone through the gauntlet of, hey, create an image, and then okay, change this, and then it completely breaks the image, and you're like, what, did you get like the same process that you had to tune and tune and tune, or did you feel like it was like ready to go out the gate?
Yeah, no, this was very much an iterative process for us, and we're still iterating on it every day. The kind of the magic here is that, as part of that DEF CON talk was about starting to leverage AI, and agents to be a force multiplier for our pen tests. And you're going to have a really bad time if you just go to something like Claude and say, "Hey, go hack this thing." Not only because of the cybersecurity issues that it flags on all the time, but it's going to take some context that is available out on the internet and might not get it right. We talk about hallucinations, and I'm going to say ignorance on the part of the AI, and that it's going to take whatever data it was fed to and whatever it was trained on. So part of that talk was about how you train your agents to do a really good job. You really need to take some of your institutional knowledge and knowledge out there on the internet and have it build a playbook. Teach it how you want to hack stuff. And that was what ended up coming out of our event with that $20 $25 camera with a 20-year-old vulnerability, is that we started with a playbook. And I'm going to fully admit, we asked AI to create the playbook, and then human reviewed said playbook and said, yeah, no, this is garbage. And I will fully admit, when we built that playbook, I put stuff in there that I probably wasn't going to find on this device, and it tried on this device the first time, even though the ports weren't even open for it. Like, okay, we now have to build the playbook. Like, hey, when you start finding these types of things, use these techniques, these tools, and so forth. So it has been a very iterative process to start building that. You've got to start small. You're going to iterate on it, and it's still really important to have the human in the loop, because we think creatively. The AI does a little bit, and it's not creativity, it's just math. Case in point, one of the pen tests that I'm working on currently, the agents are spinning in the background right now, um, on a device, and I said, "Hey, have it go look for command injection vulnerabilities." And the playbook knows how to do command injection vulnerabilities, but it targeted the API endpoint. And I said, "No, I actually said the web interface," and it interpreted web interface as the API endpoint. And after it got done with the API endpoint and not finding a whole lot there, I said, no, no, I meant the user web interface on this device. Oh, okay. And so then it went and did that. And, you know, maybe I hadn't even considered doing the same thing on the API. So it went and did that, but it still definitely needs some guidance. So yeah, you're gonna have a bad time if you just give it a bunch of tools and tell it to go do stuff. It definitely needs some guidance, and that's where the human experience comes in, with some of that, and it can help guide that playbook and build that playbook in an iterative fashion.
So there is a lot of tuning.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, if you think about, as a human, you didn't start sitting down your first day doing a pen test and have every answer. You built that over time, and that's exactly
I don't
what
know.
you're doing.
Lee told me he did earlier. He was 5. He was 5 years old penetration testing. He was a whiz
Oh.
kid, you know.
All right, so maybe Lee's an anomaly.
He's an anomaly. That's fine. We'll let him go.
Yeah, superheroes like Lee can sit down and do that, but normal humans like me, I couldn't do that at 5, and it took many years in my career to build up some of the tools and the techniques and the methodology, to be able to do some of this full sort of scope pen test,
Yeah.
on IoT devices, because it's very much a discipline, across so many verticals. Like, if you're considering IoT, you're not only talking disassembling hardware and digging out your soldering iron, you're talking about being able to reverse engineer file systems and binaries and web traffic and wireless and cloud and web interfaces and APIs, and the list goes on and on about all the sort of things that you need to know about.
Yeah.
So for me, it becomes a force multiplier, because AI has been so much of human knowledge at this point that it knows more than I have forgotten.
So I do want to
And
say
that's
I
good.
applaud the AI masterclass that you're giving right now, because I feel like that was one of the. No, and I'm serious,
Yeah.
because one thing, and maybe it's because we're security minded, but whenever AI agents came out, it was like, this solves everything, and
Yeah.
there's not going to be any problems, which you know is what it is.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we'll let history tell that tale. But the fact that you're leaving room for assumptions, and you're
Mhm.
testing them, and basically approaching this with like the scientific method in the back of your mind, people
Yeah.
need to hear that.
Yeah.
Organizations, enterprises need to hear that,
I
and that
agree.
it's not just that touch and go.
It's not
So
a
Yeah.
plug
speak
and play. Yeah.
Nope.
right,
Nope.
right.
Yep, and on the converse, so like not only on the attack side, like great, it goes and finds some stuff, and I was working on a test the other day, and oh yeah, we came back with a 9.8 CVSS score on this vulnerability because it was an unauthenticated stuff, and I'm like, no, it's not unauthenticated. I gave you credentials to this, and you used them. Yeah, there's still got to be that human in the loop, and you've got to think about, and you quite honestly, you need to make the agents prove their work. And again, back to having the humans back in the loop of
Yeah.
having improved the work and that scientific method. Like, yeah, like your math teacher in elementary school loved the fact that you had that answer, but how did you get there? Did you just write it down off of somebody else's paper, or do you know how to do the work? And using agents and AI as a force multiplier, make them show their work so that you can validate the work as well.
So tuning an AI agent like this, and improving it. If and I'll say this, I was a blue teamer, or I'm still a blue teamer through and through. I've always been on the defense side. I think I got a pen test plus cert back in the day for a degree. Never used it. But I'll ask you this: say I do walk in, and you give me that agent, will that lower the skill level that I need, that it already knows what to do, and or is it like catching me up faster without having to go through the whole lessons learned, and then I can move from there? Or is it something that you still need to have an entry, or come in entry level, work your way up, learn the quirks of the trade, and so on?
Use this back. There are absolutely whole, I just where that is not my forte, but I can get an agent that can do that, and it can leverage tools to start figuring out those logic paths where my brain just doesn't grok it, where it doesn't get it, and it can actually explain it to me, and I can start learning from some of that. So not only is it got to validate, but it's got to teach me. And I will tell my agents that, great, you found this thing. Now explain it to me like I'm a sixth grader. How does this work? Start from the beginning. Tell me about your ROP chains. Tell me about why this didn't work because of this and that. So, not only is it finding stuff, it's also educating me as well. And then now that I'm getting that education, I can start guiding it in better areas.
I
So I
love
think
that. Oh.
no, go ahead.
No,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead, go keep going.
So I think it's kind of that twofold. Like, not only is it going to make me faster, more efficient, find stuff that I might never do, but it has the opportunity to help me understand some of those concepts that I never could. And admittedly, I'm still not great, but I'm getting better because we're finding stuff, and I'm having it try to walk through why it works to do that validation for some of that tests.
Again, I applaud that aspect of it, of not just having a black box and you using it to educate. Because honestly,
Yeah.
I'm going to say this on camera, which I'll probably get laughed at later on, but I've always been like a Windows endpoint kid. Like, I've always focused on, like, Sysmon was great. I can work my way through Windows. When it comes to Linux, I'm still tripping around and, like, struggling. So anytime I have to ask, like, whatever AI agent you want to mention, hey, what does this command do? Why am I using it? What benefit does it have? I think learning
Yep.
to ask those questions add that level of education that going through, because it's like, okay, yeah, I know I can just run that command, but why am I doing it?
But why?
Yes.
Yeah, and that is so important. You talk about having the entry level skills and so forth. Like that is incredibly important. When I teach, it's when we teach the wireless stuff, it's not so much that, oh, we're going to teach you to do this attack and here's the end result. No, it's we teach you about the packets and the individual fields in some of the frames, so that when we are now going to go deliver this attack, you understand why you are running this tool and why you were putting this MAC address here and what it is manipulating in these individual packets to make this attack happen. So I say this is we need to teach you how to crawl before you can walk. And then you start doing some automation, whether you're just out for a nice little jog or you're out for a marathon. And depending on the level of automation that you start doing.
No, I completely agree that you got to understand the basic of it, and you got to have that mindset before you can even. I mean, you're right. You can give a tool that's fine tuned working, and someone can do it, but he asked them why.
Why? Like
that might.
That they told me to run this command and it works.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. It's like Homer Simpson, venting the steam at the power plant with the little bird. Yep. Why does it do it? I don't know. I just have to keep doing this.
I do remember that.
Yep.
I think
let's do this. Let's move a little bit to, let's talk about AI as becoming part of the supply chain. Okay. Obviously, we know about the light LLM supply chain incident, which potentially exposed thousands of organizations, hundreds of thousands of CI/CD pipelines, right? And that shows that we're not only using AI to attack or defend, AI development tools, models, library, pipelines may now become part of the supply chain themselves. So the question is, are we rebuilding the same software supply chain problems inside AI?
I think the answer is yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, I unfortunately, I do. That we're starting to leverage AI in our products, and it's now become a piece of software in our software supply chain. And just like every other piece of software, there's bad development practices, whether it's intentional or not. And even some of the decisions we're making around which types of AI and which models that we're choosing are not particularly great. So I think it's the same thing. Like you talk about that the incident with the light LLM. Yeah, like it's software. They were problems, and now it's in critical portions of our CI/CD pipeline that it starts to expose stuff. I mean, I think about where we're starting to see AI pop up. We talked with some folks recently that some of the new, I'm going to say in-dash entertainment units in your vehicle, some of this new stuff is likely going to feature AI unit in your dash. And what's the next place that we're going to see AI in our cars? Doing engine management, dealing with safety, like
it's going to be all in. I mean,
yeah. I mean, we're ripe for that. I was fortunate last year to buy a new truck, and like when it starts seeing things getting really close in the backup camera, it will jam on the brakes for me.
Yeah.
Like,
my wife's Prius does that too. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It literally stops for you. Yeah.
It's a switch now, but when does it become something that is determined by artificial intelligence or an LLM?
It feels like when I was a kid, my mother in the back seat when I was a kid telling me to slow down. That's what AI is now.
That makes you want to go out and buy like a 1975 Dodge Ram.
Yeah, and just don't speak to me. Just drive.
Yeah, right.
I don't want to speak to you.
Yep, I'll be the one that's responsible for keeping it between the mayo and the mustard. Thank you.
That's me.
And,
so, Larry,
you mentioned the problems that we're having. I think we got to remember that this was trained on the internet. So, like, if we've trained on supply chains or weak supply chains, that may have been ingested, and been part of the requirements or recommendations and so on.
Yeah, agreed.
So, Larry, do you think if one trusted AI dependency is compromised, how far can that compromise spread?
Oh, I honestly don't know. Um, I because so much of some of these dependencies are so either model, whether they be local model or frontier model dependent. I think it is going to be how it ends up being used ultimately, and what sort of guardrails they've been given. Like I when I hear this question, I think back to some of the recent ones about what was it? OpenAI used some stuff and it hacked other stuff and it wasn't supposed to.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen similar types of things that used some AI in a research lab for hacking some stuff, and it found some data about the environment and said, "Oh, I'm going to go scan that," and like that was out of scope.
Yeah, that was the
But
Huggy Face thing, wasn't it?
yeah, the Hugging Face
Yeah.
stuff. Yep. I think OpenAI even said that it had some stuff that had pointed to its own internal models and found that it was running Linux underneath and hacked its own stuff internally. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but I've seen this stuff exceed its scope,
Yeah.
and maybe that is because we didn't, or in my case, and that it went and hacked another device that wasn't in scope because it had found out about the environment. That maybe that was my own fault because I hadn't defined the scope well enough. And when we see when you ask the question about one component, how far can this go? I think ultimately will become down to how well we start scoping the environment in which they can interact. I mean, what was it? 2 days ago was the anniversary of Skynet
Yes.
becoming self-aware.
Yes. I saw all the
So, yeah,
videos. Yep.
yep. Like, we didn't necessarily, the movies didn't define scope well enough for that particular artificial intelligence about what it should have control over. Right?
You know how many
Hey,
times
Jared,
people,
I would say, if you
guys,
don't mind, kind of jump on a question. Like,
yeah, I was going to
something
ask you
about
guys, Lee, if you want to take it, because we're only at 12:52, and Lee, if you want to kind of finish it off with the last questions, it's all you.
Oh, I was going to build on the question you asked, but
Oh, go. Yeah, no, please
talk
go ahead.
about the scope, right? Like, are we going to see like and I'm not going to use the term that I hate because but are we going to see something like a WannaCry or a Shamoon from AI? Do you think that'll ever happen? And I know that's a hypothetical question, but or do you feel that we're in a good place, that we've learned enough, that we can secure enough that hopefully that won't become a thing?
I'm gonna draw some very interesting parallels here, and tie us back to even some of our earlier conversation here. I think we've learned enough, and I think we are starting to be in a good place. But there's always gonna be that one bad apple that ruins the bunch, and there's gonna be that one manufacturer that uses a 20-year-old web server in their product. There's going to be one manufacturer that doesn't put the appropriate guardrails on the stuff that they're using, and doesn't limit the scope, even though they should know better. And I think it's going to come down to the same problems we've got now across the whole host of other issues: is cost and speed. Like, it's going to cost more for us to restrict this and put it in a better example, and that's going to also slow us down, which means we're maybe not going to be first to market, or it's going to reduce our bottom line. And same problem that we've seen for decades in this industry.
Hmm.
Well, that's good to hear.
So, I mean, but we're at a point now that we know this. Like, this is not a new problem.
I felt
We can
after
do
that
better.
point, I
We can do
needed to turn
better.
my camera off and just, go take a nap. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, Larry, I'm out of here. See you later.
Yeah.
No,
It
I'm actually
it doesn't
glad
all
that
have
that
to
was
be
the answer. I don't look for the doom and gloom. Like I was glad that that was the answer, and not just
Yeah, that's a good
oh
answer.
yeah, no, we're done. We're done for.
Yeah, no, we're not done for. We're at a point where we can improve this, and we should, and we know the problems, and these are historical problems we've seen over and over again. It's now just a matter of being committed to it. And unfortunately, I think Man, 20-year-old me would hate me for saying this. That it really comes down to some of our policies and regulations.
Yep.
Like 20-year-old me, punk rock kid, wouldn't have wanted to down with the government. But like the government is arguably going to be the one that is really going to steer this, and is going to be that catch
Yeah.
to make this happen.
You mentioned the AI, the EU AI Act. Stuff like this is gonna provide those guardrails before it gets
Yeah.
out of control. And the United States
Yep.
is going to have to become a leader in that stuff too. And
Hmm.
I
Oh yeah.
understand, they don't want to minimize, they don't want to shut down our businesses. I get it, right? They don't want to put too many regulations. And they're saying, no, China's not putting the regulations. They're running with AI. But around the world, it's going to have to be done. There's going to have to be some agreement before this gets kind of loose. But
Agreed.
that's just
Agreed.
my take.
Yep. I don't dispute that at all. I agree with you.
Lee, did you want to ask any questions on? I know we had several different segments on when IoT becomes infrastructure for the attacker. Lee, did you want to cover all those? I know we only have 4 minutes left, so that's up to you if you want to cover some of those, or I could do the closing.
I actually just have one more question. It's actually off the list because as
Okay.
we were going through this, one thing that we kept focused on, enterprise, right? And if you think about the IoT devices purchased by just households,
Hmm.
how can and this doesn't have to be, again, this doesn't have to be something huge, but as a individual outside of an environment where I can test and pen test, or like without me having to set up my own lab in my house,
Hmm.
just so that if I buy an IoT device, I can make sure. What's Do you have ways that individuals, non-technical people alike, and technical people can protect themselves from becoming a victim to all these attacks?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it that's a really interesting one, especially when you consider the average consumer. Like I think about my mom who might go down to buy a home security camera at Best Buy or off of Amazon. I think it really comes down to just some of the simple basic hygiene. You know, have that firewall, keep it updated, and when your devices ask you to update them. And I'm a prime example for not doing so. I have a bunch of security cameras and I want to go look at something in the backyard. What was that big crash in the backyard? And the first thing it says, you connect to the camera and says, there's a software update available. Would you like to update it? I'm like, no, I want to see what that crash was. And then weeks go by and maybe I don't access that camera and another crash happens in the backyard and says there's an update available. Yeah, you need to have some simple practices about going and logging into your apps and checking some of that stuff and making sure your stuff is up to date. I think that's really the simplest answer for those that don't have it. You have to put a little bit of trust and faith into those products that you are buying, that when they find problems that they do attempt to fix them. And refresh your devices every once in a while. Some of the stuff that we've been seeing from those big damaging attacks were all devices that folks had in their home networks for 10 years, and we're not getting those updates, and they've been end of life by the manufacturer. So maybe you need to not have some tech debt in your own homes as well, and you maybe consider updating some stuff every once in a while. It's an expense, but that's you get what you pay for, and you have to spend a little money to stay secure.
Awesome. Thank you.
You know what?
No
I
problem.
think that's a perfect ending. Because Lee, that was a great question. Honestly, but what I would like to do before we end this, I always try to leave a little time. Please, both of you, Lee, if you want to start first, and I mean Larry, if you want to start first, and Lee next. Promote anything you're working on, anything, your new books, your company you're working on. Love to hear about it.
Oh, all right, I'm
Oh,
good.
you
I'm
can
going
start
first.
first. I'm sorry. Yeah,
Oh,
Larry, you can
okay.
start
Yeah,
first.
no
Sorry about
worries.
that.
No
I
worries.
should have made that more
Yeah,
clear.
yeah. So some of our stuff you can find for my day job, which is a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about is really a passion, at finitestate.io. Also, I've been pushing a bunch of fun stuff for both wireless IoT, you name it, either to my blog, which is same as LinkedIn, and it's breakstuffforfun.com. You can also do the non-family friendly, and you can replace stuff with a four-letter Anglo-Saxon word, and it also goes to the same place. And I'll post about some of the stuff on LinkedIn, and just a whole bunch of stuff ends up on my GitHub repository at Hackster the Matrix.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Lee?
No problem.
Yeah, so for work, I have a workshop coming up. I conduct a threat hunting workshop where we try and help the community get better with their threat hunting skills, looking at elastic logs, looking at hypotheses, and really trying to work through the data once we find something. I post a lot on LinkedIn too, so if you want to follow me, and I do have something in the works that's still getting worked on, but stay tuned.
Awesome. And you can reach everyone, of course, on LinkedIn. You can reach myself on LinkedIn, the group on LinkedIn. But please connect with these gentlemen, kind of follow what they're doing. That'd be awesome. All right, I'm going to end the stream here. If you